Well, welcome to the Burnout Podcast. It's an honor. I'm super excited for my guest today. She's a dear friend. She is a life coach. She's an attorney, a mother, just had a brand new baby. She's got a lot going on. And, you know, I'm a huge advocate for coaching. I've spent a small fortune on coaching and therapy over the years. You know, I'm in this space myself. And I can honestly say, you know, we were talking here the other day, like there's some things that we did towards the tail end of us coaching that really changed my life and put me on a trajectory. And I'm so grateful. We're going to get into some of that. But Rachel Royal, it's an honor to have you today on the Burnout Podcast.
Thank you, Adam. I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And we're going to get into lots of things. We're going to share our personal stories. We're going to talk about, you know, Rachel is going to offer a unique perspective as a woman coach who's also worked with men and also with women and the dynamics of how we kind of work back and forth. But one of the things I just kind of want to, kind of start with this, if that's okay, is so the irony in this whole thing is, you know, I originally hired Rachel. I was, I'd gone through a breakup and we were trying to get back together and I'm like, okay, I'm going to hire a coach. We were working together with that and, committed to a certain amount of sessions. And, halfway through the sessions, we ended up breaking up and I'm just like, oh, you and I had a conversation like, do you still want to continue? And I'm like, I don't know. What's the point? I had all these stories in my head. I'm like, you know what? There's a lot that you have to offer. And, I'm going to lean into this. And it was on the last session that we had that we were having a conversation around the story we tell ourselves, right? You recall this. And which that conversation, things you introduced to me to that, what's the story I'm telling myself? Because, having gone through a breakup, having lost my business, going through all of this very traumatic, life-altering, identity-crashing events, I was still stuck in that. My worth was tied to other people. My worth was tied to my failures and all of that. And that last coaching session, was incredible. So I want to get in, talk about that. And the other thing I want to say too is, with the men that I work with, and I would say everybody that's listening to this, one of the key things that I truly believe that you embody, that you took it to a whole nother level with me, is that we need to take radical accountability for everything in our life.
Yes.
Right. So if you remember that, you started coaching, you're like, we're going to approach this. Again, this is how I'm showing up in a relationship, but it's like, it's not about the other person. And let's just insert a little asterisk. Of course, when you're in a relationship, when you're talking about relational things, it takes two to tango. There's two people that are part of it. Right. And it's easy to point the finger that he's doing this or she's doing that. But every time, if I ever got into that headspace, you would check me in a very gentle and loving way. But it was interesting because I felt like, what, I'm really self-aware. I understand that I've done enough work, but like you helped push me into a whole nother level of that, which I'm so grateful for. Because at the end of the day, it's like the answers are inside of us. We are the creators and authors of our life.
Yes.
And we're all playing a role in what we do.
Yes.
And so I just want to honor that. And I know that's a big thing. I mean, you prefaced that way before I even engaged you as a coach. You talked a lot about that. So let's start there. Let's expand on what that is to you and what you see, not only in your own life and the lives of others you've worked with.
Yeah. I'm really, really adamant about that in my coaching is radical accountability. We are responsible for the results in our life. And the reason I know that is because I used to live the opposite of that, right? I didn't know it because you don't know it when you're a victim. You don't realize it. But I was so unhappy in my life. I was miserable. This is about 6 years ago. I had just graduated from law school. I had 2 beautiful, healthy baby boys. I passed the bar, got my dream job as an attorney. I was married, had a beautiful home. Everything seemed perfect. And yet I was miserable. I was so unhappy. And, I felt so alone. All my friendships didn't work out. And my marriage, it seemed good on the outside, but you know how that is when everyone thinks it's great, but it's actually terrible and very unhealthy. And I didn't realize that I was the one who created all of this. I always thought, I'm such a good person. I deserve to be happy. I deserve good things. I know I'm a good person. Why am I so unhappy? And why do I feel this way? And it wasn't until I was introduced to a coach who taught me the concept that we create our reality, that it's nobody else. And she helped turn everything back on me. I was listening to a podcast and she said, your thoughts create your feelings. Your feelings drive your actions, and your actions create your reality. And so if you're unhappy, it's nobody else's fault. It's because of what you're thinking and feeling, what you're believing, what you're manifesting, and you're taking action on, and you're creating it. And it was like this light bulb moment. My mind, like, you know, those moments where your mind just like blows. I was driving and it was just like, and I was like, oh my God, why did no one ever tell me this? I never heard that before. And so that was the beginning of just continuing to look at myself and be like, okay, even though it was, you know, maybe my husband mistreated me or it wasn't a very healthy relationship, it was like, I chose that relationship and I chose to stay in it. Right. And it was like, do I want something else, then I need to change it. I was miserable in my job as an attorney. It's like, I don't even know why I became an attorney. It was default because my dad was an attorney. It was so unintentional, but I created this. Nobody did it to me. And so I then chose to change my actions and change my job. And within a year, I burned up my life, right? And I changed, I left my religion. I got a divorce. I changed my careers and moved. And it was in such a short period of time, but it was because I realized I was responsible for all of it. And then I just took that into every area of my life. So, and I then took that and created a beautiful life where I'm now so fulfilled. I'm remarried in a beautiful marriage. I'm so happy. I know that I'm responsible and nobody else is responsible for my happiness.
So, question, you know, in relationships, marriage, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, you know, there's a lot of talk in society today around polarity, right? The man taking the lead, right? In order for a woman to to be able to kind of lean into her feminine and fully receive, the man needs to, you know, take responsibility, needs to lead this. You know, there's a lot of talk on social and people, you know, in society today around polarity and masculine, feminine energy. And it's the man's job to take the lead. And, you know, you have alpha male coaches. It's all this. You have other women saying, well, women aren't able to do it because a man can't do this or that. And what I hear you saying, ultimately, that all plays a role into it. But ultimately, like, how would you address that specific subject?
I'm glad you asked because everyone is so different. I think to just say this is the man's role and this is the woman's role or the masculine and the feminine, it's so restricting because we're all so different and we all have masculine and feminine within us. And for example, I'm a type A alpha female, right? And so what might work for me is not going to work for a female with a different personality who has different interests or responds differently or with a different past or different triggers. Everyone is so different. And so I kind of have learned, like I learned a lot about that. But for me personally, I kind of learned to step away from the roles of like, the man's supposed to do this and the woman, so the woman can do this. I think there's certain things that are universal, like, and we'll get into this later. I know we'll talk about integrity, but in a relationship with a man and a woman, the woman's number one desire is to feel safe. And that can only happen if her man is in integrity and does what he says he's going to do. And so that I believe is a universal truth. But when it comes to
that'd be work on both sides as well.
Yes, right. Definitely. And so yeah, I think it's just it's very fluid for every person and every relationship.
And so, you know, and you work with both men and women,
yes,
and you've done a lot of work with men, you know, so as a female coach, right? In a healthy marriage now, you've had your own experiences. You know, what do you see with men today, right? The men that you've worked with, have you seen a common theme? Have you seen something that, you know, we as men have, I think we're more alike than not, right? There's a common thread between why certain things aren't working or not working. What have you noticed something with men offering from a woman's perspective as a coach from a perspective of what you see?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is, a lot of men are stuck in their heads. And so a lot of my job in coaching was helping men get out of their minds, their analytical thinking mind, and get into their hearts. And really why that's so important is because your mind is a tool and you can talk yourself in or out of anything. And men have been socialized to not be emotional, to very much be in their head. And maybe part of that is biology too, right? But I think that kind of taboo for men to be emotional or be vulnerable or be in their heart space has really been a detriment to them and to society. And so a lot of my coaching has been helping men really feel their emotions and get into their heart space and get in touch with their true desires and really being like, what do I want? What do I truly desire? Not what I should do or what I should want, not what should, right? All the shoulds. So
yeah, it's as you say, I've got a client that, and we're going to get into this as far as like, what's your story and who you are as a person. And, and one of the things I was asking him and helping him craft, what I call his personal declaration of like who he is as a person. And, I asked him like, what's most important to you? He goes, my family and my kids. And I'm like, is that true? That was the first thing that he popped out. So then I asked him, I said, okay, so how do you spend your time? Right. So we started going through his day and he spent little time with his kids, little time with his wife. And again, it's like, hey, I'm not trying to tell you what's important to you or not, because, regardless of what society says, or regardless of whatever your religion, or it's like ultimately like what's most important to you, and just own that, because really basically your actions and where you put energy is really what ultimately, it's not what you say, it's what you do, But it was really hard as we dug deeper and deeper into that. And it was hard for him to say. He goes, actually, the most important thing for me is my career. And I'm like, and it was freeing for him to say that, but there was a lot of guilt and shame in him saying that, but
that's helping him get back into integrity of like, actually, this is the truth for me. And there's no right or wrong. That's all my coaching is based on that. There's no right or wrong. It's just, what do you want? And are you being intentional and honest about it? And are you creating that?
Yeah. Because I was in that space, and, when I was married and, my whole world, I was unhealthily weighted into work, my career, my purpose, my why, my value, my work, everything was tied to that. And so at home, my marriage was falling apart, so I didn't want to be at home. And then I was there physically with my kids, but mentally and emotionally, I was totally checked out. And so if you would have asked me then, yeah, my kids are important. But the reality is like what I was giving them was half-ass, was lackluster at best. And much of what I was doing was just projecting my insecurities, not knowing how to manage my emotions onto my kids. I was grumpy, I was ornery, and I look back on that, and I'm grateful for the work I've done, and I've shifted, and I have an incredible relationship with my kids today, but it took, again, taking radical accountability, changing my story around that. And I think recognizing that the stories that I was telling myself weren't serving me,
Yeah.
And I love that, about the story. So again, I got to give you so much credit for this, because and during that time frame when we were talking, I'd had an experience with in an ayahuasca ceremony around this topic. So it was just on the forefront. It's like the universe, God's like, hey, what's the story you're telling yourself, And I geeked out so much on this that, again, it's easy to point a finger. It's easy to like, well, this person did this or this person did that. And then I'm grateful you said that before, because it makes me feel like I'm not alone, because I can be a head case and I can be in my head about all sorts of different things. And what I've realized is like, anytime I get in my head today, it's like, okay, is the story I'm telling myself serving? Because I don't like how I feel.
Yeah.
And it's not, and if I have a conversation to have with somebody, I'll have it, but many times it has to do with something in the past, has to do with something, frankly, I have zero control over, but I've created a story that's creating anxiety, angst, shame, guilt, whatever it happens to be. So I've gone through this practice where I call it's like a 3-step process where I just like, I pause, I reflect, and then I redirect. And then if I come back to that, then it's like, well, what's the story I'm telling myself? And then I'm learning, and this is what I teach too with men. It's like, we can change our story.
Always, in any moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have to change. And I think the challenge for that, maybe for women as well, but like for men especially, is like, if we change our story or change our perspective, or more often than not, we're the ones causing the problem.
Always.
Right. And so it's like looking in the mirror, it's like, oh shit, this is me. It's humbling. Like there can be some shame attached to that, but at the end of the day, it's like, it's also freeing. It's like, wait a minute, I'm the problem here, but guess what? I'm also the solution.
Yeah.
And it's really empowering to like release that, tied to every people, and just realize like we're the creators. I said this at the beginning, we're the creators, the authors of our life. And I think you saw with me too, it's like when we go through certain things, it's like I'm resisting it because I had this story, and there were many times after our calls where I just sit and I'm just like, gosh dang it, and just not fully grasping it, and not angry at you, but just like frustrated But then as I've dug deeper into that and reflected back on that and many things in my life, it's like, it's just a story and I can change it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we're so resistant to taking accountability because we don't want to, like, it's like we want to not be at fault, right? We want it to just, like, so hard to acknowledge. It's like, actually, it sounds like bad news, but it is the best news ever. Because if we're responsible, then we can change it. And that's, I love it. Every time I start with a new client who's new to this work or whatever, there's always that period. It's like the abyss before, right? The blessings. And it's like, they start to feel shittier before they start feeling better, because they're like, oh my God, I created this. I'm responsible. But then they become so empowered because they realize I'm so powerful. I created this situation I didn't want, but I'm so powerful. I can then create what I want. Right. And so it's so fun. It's like my favorite thing to watch, that transition.
So one of the things that I realized in my own life, and I've realized with all the guys that I'm working with, it's been a common theme, is I think one of the reasons, I would say, I'm going to actually go as far as say I know one of the reasons that we struggle as much with taking radical accountability, because we tie our worth to it. Our worth's tied to that. So it's interesting. The guys I work with, doesn't matter. I mean, I got guys that make a ton of money, others, I mean, different areas of their life, but it's fascinating. And they don't necessarily equate it to worth at the beginning, but once they finally feel open and safe and they start sharing more and more, it comes down to worthiness. It's like, I don't feel worthy of this. I don't feel worthy of that. And when we all of a sudden we're the problem, or we're creating that, which of course we are, but like admitting and owning it, it actually is a reflection of who is our self-worth.
Yes. Yeah.
Independent of, a lot of times, especially here in Utah, worthiness gets tied to religion and other things. It's like, this has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with just the inherent value, a man or a woman feels, that all of a sudden it means they're less than, versus like, I mean, it's just a story. It's like, I fucked up. I screwed up. It's just, I made a mistake. That's all it was. And then you make adjustments, versus like, oh my gosh, I'm worthless. I'm this, I'm that. And the stories we tell ourselves. And it's fascinating that I believe like the ultimate catalyst to pull yourself out of that, or at least to be able to navigate through accountability and to just not let it like take you down, is understanding, and not only understanding, but knowing that your worth isn't tied to that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, well, not, I know, I know that is the greatest work that I've done personally, is shifting from feeling worthless and trying to use all these achievements and all these things. I had a lot of achievements and all of these things, trying to make my life look so great, to really hide the fact that I didn't feel worthy. And I didn't know it. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I was trying to like build my worthiness with my accomplishments. And really, I just didn't know that I was inherently worthy. And so that has been the biggest story flip for me that has changed my life, is just truly believing I am infinitely and inherently worthy no matter what.
Okay, so I hear you. People listening hear you.
Yeah.
So again, easier said than done.
Yeah.
Right? So what did you do? What happened? Like, was there a process you took? I mean, again, it's not an overnight where it's like, I don't feel worthy tomorrow. It's like, oh, hey, I'm worthy. I mean, for some maybe, but like it's typically a process. Like, what did you go through? Like, what catalyst? What changed? What did you have to do in order to like actually say that? Because again, those that are watching this, I can see it in your face. Like, there's no question there. Sometimes we'll say things we don't mean. It's like, you know your worth. Like, I know my worth, and I didn't for most of my life, frankly.
Yeah. And so the work was, and it's like you said, it's not overnight, but it's the day in and day out. I had this process where I would just write everything I was thinking and feeling. I call it like a download. Everything, no matter what comes. And I would see all these little sentences in my brain, all these beliefs that I had that were creating my reality. And a lot of them had to do with how I felt, or, and everything, like you said, it's a universal issue. Everything goes back to self-worth, everything. And so anytime I felt unworthy, or I felt like a loser, or whatever it was, or even if it still comes up, or like, oh, I just like felt like a loser in that moment, or wherever I go, and I'm like, no, you know what? I am infinitely, inherently worthy. And it was seeing that thought and what that made me feel, and feel that feeling of unworthiness and how I would act. And I would write down, okay, these are the actions that I take from unworthiness. And then this is how it's creating my reality. And it, what you focus on expands. And so I would see all these shitty results because I was feeling unworthy. And then I would take that thought, that whatever, it's like, I feel unworthy or I feel like a loser. And I would say, what do I want to think about myself? What do I want to believe about myself? And I would change that. And that's one of my sentences. I am infinitely inherently worthy no matter what. And there's nothing I can do, nothing I've ever done that can change that. And so I would then intentionally think that thought and emotionalize it until I felt the truth of it. Because I do believe that's true for everyone. And then from that, I would see how the actions I took from that place of worthiness and then the results that would come into my life. And so, and it's still a practice, right? Like now it's so much easier. Like, yeah, I do feel worthy. I don't have to put on a front. I used to be such a fake person, right? Like I would do things or say things to try to seem cool because really I felt so unworthy. But now it's just like, I just am, and I am worthy and I have nothing to prove.
Yeah. And I'm the same way, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like it's rooted in insecurities, right?
Yes.
And it's tying our worth to other people's opinions and I joke, maybe you'll appreciate this, like with men, especially, like if you go to a networking thing in business, right? You walk into a room and it's like walking around. It's like, who's got the biggest stick? Who's driving the nicest car? Who's got all the, like, whatever. It's showboating. It's like, look at me, look at me, look at me. Right. And the reality is, if we're all being honest, like that guy over there, he just filed for bankruptcy. That guy's marriage is falling apart. And it's like, we're scared to kind of really truly show ourselves that. Like you mentioned this earlier, as far as being vulnerable and being open, but of course, because society has told a story that we can't show that side of ourselves. We can't do that. Our worth's tied to how much money I have, how much, especially with men, it's like my money, success, and all these different things. Yeah. But the thing, I want to come back to what you said is like, I love that you said, like, there's still moments where you still fall back into that.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I'm in this new state. Like, I don't, like, generally speaking, I don't question my worthiness. Like, so I recite to myself every day. I tell myself I'm worthy and deserving of anything and everything I want. Like I'm constantly telling myself that. And when those moments come up, right, that I don't feel, or whatever the feeling is, and I've gotten pretty self-aware that I know that that's the root of it. So that I can go to that. I just remind myself like, no, that's just a story. Right. And I don't need to go there. And so our brain's like a computer. And we've told ourselves certain things, much of it subconsciously, much of it's just gone through the motion, how we were raised from religion to parents to society or whatever. And it's the default. But at the end of the day, it's like, even though sometimes it feels impossible, it's like, no, we can rewrite the code. We can rewrite what's there. And what I love about it is like, whenever I get into the space, it sounds like you're doing the same thing. It's like, no, I'm there. And I remind myself that. And the more you do that, it's when you go down into those rabbit holes, for me, it's like when I get into my head, it's like, I don't go as deep as I used to. It's like, and the more and more I practice this, it's like, it's not an issue, or when it does, it's just a blip, and I'm able to pull myself out of it so much quicker. And it's like, it's empowering.
Yeah.
Because when someone is in that headspace, it affects everything.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that is the gift and the beauty of coaching, is that you and I are coaches. We help people. We have coaches. We've been coached. But it's if you don't have the tools, a coach can give you those tools first. And then if you have those tools, you still need that outside perspective because you are in your own brain. And yes, you're able to help yourself. But a coach can just take you so much further because you are blocked to in your brain sometimes. And so that is why I will always be an advocate for coaching, and I always coach and I always have a coach. And so when you said that, yes, but it's so beautiful when you're able to do that, and instead of going and spinning or letting it affect you for a long period of time, it's like you can recognize it, and then you have the tool to get yourself out of it, and then take that accountability again. And then I just wanted to go back. I'm not perfect with any of this at all, right? Like I'm so much better than I was, but just recently I was feeling, a way about my husband or just wanting him to do something because I thought it would make me feel better. And I was like, why do I felt so bad. And I was like, that's the red flag for me. If I feel bad or disempowered, it's because I am thinking that somebody else can make me feel better. Right. And I had to go in and be like, I want him to do this because I think it's going to make me feel this way. But actually, I can make myself feel that way. And I can take these actions I want him to take. And I did it. And I realized that it had nothing to do with him doing those things. It was some crazy belief that if he did those things, it meant that he really loved me, right? Even though I know he loves me. And then it went even deeper. It was like, oh, ultimately, I still sometimes think I'm not worthy of his love, or I'm not worthy of a man's love. And that was like my biggest wound.
So I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Did you tell him what you wanted him to do?
Yeah. And because I did it, and it's so funny, right? And talking about relationships is when I'm in that disempowered state and I tell him what I want him to do, it never turns out well, right? It's so like, do this, and then he feels crappy because he thinks like it's not enough for me or whatever, right? But I can also, and women, we can be such powerful influencers for our men, but it's coming from an empowered state of, hey, I see you, I see how powerful you are. I think that, you could do this or do that if that's what you really want. And I'm here for you and I believe in you and I got you. And if that's what you want, I support you. Versus you should do this because it's going to make me feel better. Right. And then just detaching from whatever they're doing. You need to detach what your partner is doing or somebody else is doing to your emotional well-being, because you're responsible for that. And they don't really, it doesn't affect it. You think it does, but what they're doing or not doing, it can't affect you emotionally.
Well, and I would, and I appreciate just the way you worded that. I mean, that was so beautifully articulated, right? Because it's like, even, the art of persuasion and the art of seduction of doing things. I mean, I truly believe most men, I mean, at our core, we want to be seen. Mm-hmm. We want to be respected. We want to feel appreciated. And again, it's like, again, gamify it, if you will, right? It's like, okay, there's certain things that you want as a wife and as a woman, right? How do you communicate that in such a way to your husband to have him show up in a certain way, right? And so it's like, it's coming from an empowered state,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
And building them up. And I think both men and women should build each other up and be seen. But men especially, it's like, I don't know why this is coming to mind. I remember when I was towards the tail end of my marriage, I had moved out for several months and was getting ready to file for divorce, and it was toxic. And, I ended up getting divorced, but at that time we were sitting there talking and she looked at me and she goes, make it your mind, divorcing or not, like just this like matter of fact, our sisters are there. It was this most awkward thing. And I was getting ready to say like, I'm done. And she goes, I need you. Like and it's like, I melted because I didn't feel seen. I mean, and again, not taking away from any of my part, but like in that I hadn't felt seen. I hadn't felt appreciated, all these feelings, emotions. And all of a sudden in that moment I felt seen. And like, I just melted, just started sobbing. It's like, I don't want this. And, unfortunately we weren't able to work through it, but I just remember like, it was, hindsight, easy to play Monday morning quarterback. But like, I've noticed a lot with men, especially it's like when we're seen and like, and again, I don't want to take away from guys that aren't showing up and doing what they need to, but like just being seen and appreciated for their stuff they're doing, that is miles and miles. I mean, it's crazy how big of an effect just a thank you or, hey, I see you. And again, how you worded that with Chris, I just thought that was beautiful. It's like, it's a different way of approaching it. Men love that. They like feed off of it. And even if they say I don't need that, trust me, they appreciate it.
And something I realized is that I think most men do want to be the hero, right? Most men want to please their partner. They want to be the hero. They want to do all these amazing things for their spouse. And that was a lot of what I had to take responsibility in my relationship, was that the way I was approaching things, or, I was, cutting him down or wasn't building him up. And it was just like, like, no, it's not that he doesn't want to do these things. It's just the way that I'm approaching it. And if I'm attacking him, he can't be there for me because he has to defend himself. And so I've had to reframe so many things in our relationship, and we have a very beautiful, beautiful marriage. And it's been a journey, but I used to think like, oh, I'm great. He's the one that needs to change. He's the problem, until I, really looked in and saw how I was creating a lot of the problems in our relationship. So.
No, I love that. I love that. So let's talk about the story we tell ourselves.
Yes.
Right. Again, we talked about worthiness. We talked about, how people question their worth, and you've told yourself a different story. You've changed that. You embody it. You feel it. You do that. That practice can work in every aspect of our life. So for someone that's listening to this, and they're, for those of you that are listening and feeling into what areas of your life seem off, right? Yeah. My belief is it's all rooted in a story, right? If you're in whatever aspect of it, there's a story that's associated with it that's not serving you. It's, whether it's fear, whether it's avoidance, whatever it is, there's a story that's attached to that. And that story is not serving you, and you can change that story. Yeah. And I believe ultimately that's the first place that someone needs to, change their story is who they are.
Yeah, totally.
Like, who are you? Who am I? And it's interesting. I ask people this, and I get standard answers. When I first sit down with men, I talk to, when I'm working with them, like, who are you? And this is what they say. I mean, almost verbatim. I'm a father. I'm a provider. I'm a friend, I'm a husband, it's just like, so then I'll say, I'm like, all right, if you wrote all that stuff down, right, and you're trying to psych yourself up, does that get you excited? And I had one guy, he's like, oh yeah.
That's a great question.
I'm like, he goes, oh yeah. I'm like, you get excited to say I'm a father, and I was pushing back a little bit on it. He was playing devil's advocate for a minute. We got a great relationship and kind of dug deeper into it, but the reality is it's like, those are just like, it's almost like saying like, whatever your career is, if you're a real estate agent, like, I'm a real estate agent.
Yeah.
But it doesn't say who you are.
Exactly.
And my thing is like, when people say they want to be a dad, so then why aren't you telling yourself you're the best dad in the entire world? Yeah. Like, you're the greatest father in the world. Who am I to tell you that? Yeah. Otherwise? Because if for example, if it's like, if my kids are my number one, and I want to show up for them always, and I'm telling myself I'm the greatest dad in the world, and I have a real crappy day at work, but I keep telling myself this, and I come home and the first thing I want to do is kick my shoes off, watch a show, just check out, watch the game. And if I have a little kid that comes over and wants to play with me, the truth is I don't want to, my first instinct, but I've told myself that I'm the greatest dad in the world. I'm more likely just to put the controller down, swallow my pride, and show up for my son, because I've told myself, I've rewired that I'm the greatest dad in the world, and I'm going to show up that way.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. The answer to everything is who you are being. It is everything. And that is, the work that I've done, and the work that we talked about, the work you're doing with your clients. And I think the world doesn't really understand this, and doesn't, they think like it's all about, knowing and doing, but the being is missing. And that is the most important part. And that's something that, I've been learning in different ways, but really was introduced to me by Steve Hardison. And he is the ultimate coach. My brother had the chance to get coached by him years ago. He is, he's coached billionaires and presidents and just like really, really up there. But he is one of the most evolved and loving human beings on this planet. And I've had, conversations with him, and I was going to get coached by him, but I invested that money into something else, which we can talk about later. I should have coached with Steve, but his whole concept is being, and what that means. And so, and I, on that last coaching session with you, I did feel inspired to bring that up. And I had gone through this process that I learned from Steve and his book, The Ultimate Coach, that he does with his clients. And, we all have these stories that we tell ourselves, and that is who we are being, the stories we tell ourselves. And it is crazy because the majority, for most of us, those stories are crappy. They're not great stories. And, he goes through this process where you write down everything you actually think about yourself, or all of the things that come up. And so I did that for a process, and this was back in, I think, 2021, so 3 years ago. And I wrote down everything that I would think about myself, the crappy stories I tell myself about myself. And it's really important to do this part, because if you just start trying to tell yourself great things, Steve calls it putting frosting on dog shit. Like, you're just trying to, cover up what's there. And so you do this process where you write all of these limiting beliefs, you could call them, or whatever you think about yourself. And you look at them, and even though you didn't come out of the womb believing these things, right? You were innocent when you were born, and you got these beliefs from parents, society, teachers, whatever. At some point, you chose to believe those things about yourself, right? Nobody forced you to believe them. And then he has you take that radical accountability. And it's not about forgiving the people. Maybe it is about forgiving the people that instilled those beliefs into you. But more importantly, it's forgiving yourself for ever choosing to believe that in the first place. And that is a really intense process, right? Because you are taking that responsibility. You're like, I chose to believe this, and it has manifested in my life. And then when you really forgive everyone and you forgive yourself, you become this blank slate, a blank canvas. It's like, okay, now that I'm done with all that shit, what do I want to believe about myself? Who do I want to be? And I really think this is I know.
I like that. Preface, asterisk, in caps.
This is the most important question we can ask. Who do I want to be? Who do I want to be? Because we can be anything. And, people always just think, they say, I'm this way, right? I just do this, or I am this. I'm like, no, you're choosing to believe that. And you can choose to stop, and then you can create yourself to be who you want to be.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, because part of so my belief is we're at 100% always, whatever that is. We're at maximum capacity when it comes to the stories we tell ourselves. We're at 100%. Maybe it doesn't feel like 100%, but we're giving effort and energy at the capacity of which we show up in any particular day or moment. Mm-hmm. And in order to tell ourselves a different story, to be a higher version of ourselves, to call that in, to be that, to act like that, you have to go through a process of shedding or letting go of the stuff, the stories, the beliefs that aren't serving you. Yes. So you again, like, throwing lipstick on dog shit is a great analogy. You can't do that. And I've tried that. It doesn't work. Yeah. And part of the process, and I do this, and I know you do this, is it's like, it's taking people through. It's like, okay, what are the stories you're telling yourself that aren't serving you? Yeah. And it's fascinating. People can tell you what they don't want. People can tell you all that. I mean, they don't even hesitate on that. The list can be whiteboard after whiteboard after whiteboard. And then it's like, all right, what do you want? And it's like, I don't know. Yeah. It's wild. Yeah. And I've been there, and it's like, what do you want? Who do you want to be? And many times they can't see it because they're so caught up in the story. I've been there. We're so caught up in this negative connotation, this negative self-talk, that we can't even see this version of it. Yeah. And many times, in order to help get guys there, I'm like, okay, let's take you out of it for a minute. Tell me people you look up to. What do you like about them? What do you want to emulate into your life? Who do you look up to? Like, what attributes do they have? And then they have no problem. Oh, I like this and this and this and this and this. And so it's easy to talk about somebody else. And I'm like, so what does it take for you to be that guy?
Yeah. And I think, what you said about, if you're telling yourself, I'm the best dad in the world, it's like, I think a lot of people are afraid to do that because they're like, well, what if I don't show up that way? Or that's so audacious to say that, right? But it's like, and I love this, and I learned this from Steve. It's like, if you're going to be anything, why don't you be the best? Like, really live into that and fully embrace that. And so in my declaration, right, which I created after I went through this process of forgiving myself, and you have to forgive yourself, because forgiveness is mending and the judgment that you had about yourself, right? So judgment creates separation, and I believe that we are all one. And when we judge ourselves, we're separating ourselves from source, right? And so judgment creates separation. And when we forgive ourselves, we're mending that and we're becoming one again. And then, my declaration was, and I'm sure yours is too, it was like a download. It was like a download from the universe and really just being like, okay, who am I? Who do I want to be? And so I have my declaration and I recite it daily. I say it when I'm trying to fall asleep at night, when I'm feeling anxious, and it just gets me into this powerful vibration of, oh yeah, this is who I am. And it's very audacious, but it's like, why would I have a declaration that's not, you know what I mean?
Well, and again, it's yours.
Yeah.
It's for you.
Yeah.
I tell people, and for me, I'm like, if anyone that didn't know me heard me saying this out loud, they think I'm an narcissistic egomaniac.
Yeah, for sure.
And at the end of the day, it's like, it's just whatever I'm telling myself.
Yeah.
It's what I'm telling myself. I was time of this recording, I was in California yesterday getting some tattoo done on this Sakyant. It's just very like sacramental, or very, very ceremonial, and so I try to drive into this deep meditation. It's this whole thing. And so my whole declaration came up. So and I was noticing blocks around mine's pretty audacious, but it's not necessarily audacious enough. And then I noticed some different blocks around things. And so I'm sitting there working through this while I'm getting needled by this guy, but it was a really powerful experience. It's like, why not? If someone else says, why can't you? And so I had to really work through some of these stories. I mean, I spent hours with this guy, but it was just this beautiful inward meditative place, like of all places on a tattoo table, but it was incredible to try to work through that. And so it's like, I've already started to like navigate and up level what I'm already telling myself to help take me to the next level. And for me, what it does is it keeps me in check. Mm-hmm. So if, again, this isn't part of mine, but if mine, the example I gave is like, if I'm the greatest dad in the world, like if I'm saying that, like, I know I'm not going to be the greatest dad in the world. And frankly, who's to tell me that I'm not? But nevertheless, it's a reminder that when I'm not, it just brings me right back in. It's like, oh, nope, here, right? And, a big part of mine is integrity. Mm-hmm. Talked about a little bit of that earlier. It's like, my word is my bond, integrity. So like for me, I'm so cautious of what I say yes to today because I don't want to let anyone down. I want to stay in integrity. I don't say yes to a lot of ththings that I used to. I was the yes man for everything. Yeah. Learning to say no more. But I've shared this with my oldest son, both my older sons, and my oldest son, Dominic. If anything, I ever say anything as simple as I'm taking the garbage out and I don't, he's like, you're out of integrity. I mean, I've told him, like, tell me. I'm like, you're right. So I tell myself I'm like, am I perfect? No, by no means. But like, I'm so close. I'm getting better and better and more in alignment with that. And I want to stay in that as much as I possibly can. And by reciting this, embodying this, and telling myself over and over, that's who I am, the action follows the thought.
It really does. It really does. It's so powerful. And I cannot stress enough how important and powerful this work is to do it yourself.
Oh yeah. No one can do it for you.
Yeah.
And that's the advantage of working like with you, with me, or anyone else in this, is it's like, it's a roadmap. I mean, I said this at the very beginning, as I introduced you, is the answers are inside of us. And I mean, I've known that. You took that to another level for me, and I've continued to embody that. It's like, yes, there's people that can help you. There's coaches. There's people like you and I. That can be guides to get there. But ultimately, you're the one. If you hire a coach, you're the one that's doing the work. We're just to help get there quicker. And and I truly believe when you're looking to hire a coach or work with somebody, you want to work with somebody that's been where you have been or understands the process. Yeah. Way more life experiences is way more than reading a manual or having some certification or whatever. And I'm not mitigating the importance of that, but at the end of the day, it's like, it's life experience. And have you done this? And what did you do to get through it?
Definitely. And what you said, and we've talked about this before, but my coaching philosophy is that every person is so powerful and they have the answers within them. My job is to just help remove the blocks, the limiting beliefs, and see them that way so that they can then get that information and reveal it to themselves. And I'm sure you see this in coaching too, that breakthrough moment is my favorite moment in coaching, right? When the client is just like has that breakthrough, but they retrieved it from themselves. It wasn't anything I said to them, right?
I think you and I are the same. So I don't think most people want to be told what to do. Mm-hmm. Some people tell me what to do, but more often than not, it's when they can come to the conclusion themselves and the answer. They're like, this is it.
Yeah.
That's where magic happens. It's
Because
like,
it's within them. It is.
yeah, you didn't tell me any, like again, you never did. It was always an invitation you shared, but it's like all of a sudden I chose to lean into this. And then as I leaned into it, I'm like, oh my gosh, but you put me on a path that like, I can't thank you enough for like the trajectory and the changes that have happened in my life in a relatively short period of time. And yeah, it's magic. And I tell you, it's the basis of what I do with men is it's like, change your story, change your life. Part of my declaration too is, fear is a big inhibitor, but fear is more often than not is an illusion. It's just a story.
Yeah.
So like part of my declaration is like, I actually, it's funny. We could go down rabbit holes at this as far as like, cause it's a big part of what I talk about and tell myself, but like fear is a calling. So if I'm scared of something, that's actually, it's an invitation. It's telling me the direction I need to go. And so I'm working with my own mental, emotional relationship with fear. And like even doing this podcast or putting myself more out on social. And it's like, sometimes it's scary as hell to be open and vulnerable and just say like, the story's like, what's this person? And, and the more and more I do it, the more comfortable I feel with it, the more I can detach from anyone's opinion. And what I had a coach tell me this years ago when I was going through all the heartache of losing my business. I said to him, I'm like, I wish I didn't care what other people thought. Like, I'm so caught up in everyone's opinions of me. And he goes, no, you don't. I'm like, no, I really do. This is exhausting. And he's like, and it didn't hit at the time, but it resonates big time with me now. Is like, he goes, if you didn't care what anybody thought, you'd be a crazy narcissist. It's not who you are. He goes, the goal for you and for all of us is to get to a place is like, yes, I care what other people think. Like, and I truly do, but not more than what I think about myself.
Yeah.
Big differentiator.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I want to be seen. I want to be liked, but at the end of the day, but not at the cost of my own integrity, of my own authenticity, of my own, if it's questioning my worth, it's not worth it. And it's like my circles become a lot smaller, much more intentional with who I'm working with and, who I have in my life today. And that's been a very painful, lonely in many ways, but yet there's this new level of confidence, this new level of being that has been so freeing and inviting. It's just, it's this new way of living, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you said, it's that being truly authentic with yourself, right? It's like, this is what I care about. I care more about what I think and how I feel instead of trying to please everybody else. And that's being in true integrity and authenticity. And then what I learned is that it's like, yeah, it is scary. It's just human nature to be scared of, what other people will think. It's like that tribal thing, right? Where it's like, we are tribal people. And so, historically, if people thought badly of us and we were ousted from the tribe, then that meant death. So it's a survival instinct. So it's natural. But I have learned as well that it's like, okay, if I put myself out there and people are going to judge me for it, they're just not my people. And that's okay. And the people who really know me and love me are going to have my back, and they're going to support me. And then also, one thing we had talked about is that I had learned that I like to say, I let people be wrong about me. I'm allowing them to be wrong about me, and that's okay if they have judgments and opinions of me that I think aren't true.
Yeah, I love that. It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
And you can get into that headspace, again, full circle, because you're not tying your worth to what they think.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's empowering.
Yeah.
That is a new muscle I'm flexing. And yeah, it's uncomfortable. And I find myself getting back into these old, but it's like, no, it's just like, this is a new state of being and I want to be that and I want to embody that. And especially in my role, like in a coach and a guide is like, I don't want to, there's imposter and imposter syndrome. I don't want to be an imposter. I don't want to be like, hey, this is what I'm doing, but not really doing it. Right.
Yeah.
I want, that's out of alignment. That's out of integrity. It's like, no, this really works, and like fully leaning into it. And it's uncomfortable sometimes, it's scary sometimes. And yet it is empowering.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about what you mentioned when we were catching up last week about, I'm sure you've talked about it because this is your whole thing, burn up. But how important it was for you to lose so much for you to then become the person that you are now. Because I also can relate to that.
It's interesting. That's a great question. So, I feel, that's a good one. I don't even know where to begin on that one. I believe we talk a lot about light and dark, and I believe, again, they're two separate things, but I believe the light, the ultimate, whatever we're searching for, is actually found in the pain, the heartache, the failures. That's where magic happens, and it's the avoidance of that that creates all the challenges and the problems. And more often than not, and full disclosure, I hope nobody has to go through what necessarily to the level that I went through.
Yeah.
The truth is, like, for me, I had to, I chose it, right? It was, that was my path. And for me, especially with men, we get into the state of avoidance. So we avoid in the relationships in our marriages or relationships, having the hard conversations or speaking our truth or doing that, which then creates resentment and the pain. And instead of addressing it, we turn to substances, behaviors, overcompensate into work. And I did that for most of I was overcompensating because I had major voids in my life that I just kept feeling with money and my work. My worth and everything was tied to that. And the crumbling of that going away, where I literally had nothing. My identity was gone. The money, everything about me, that at least what I had told myself about me, was obliterated. It blew up over years, but it felt like overnight. So I had to look at myself like, who the hell am I? What do I want? And it was dark and it was ugly and it was painful. And I've talked a lot about this. In one season of being suicidal, it's like, it was so dark. And yet I didn't succumb to it. I didn't lean in. Somehow I found the faith, and what I have learned through that. And one of the things that really helped me too is every challenge that I've been faced with, every one of them, divorce, finance, physically, my body, every particular challenge I've been faced with, if I look back on it, every single one of those things were for my good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Every single one. I chose to use it as fuel and level up. I grew from that. I wouldn't take, I wouldn't want to necessarily experience what I went through, but like looking back on it, like I wouldn't take it away because it's who I am today. I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't be headed where I am today had I not gone through all of that. Yeah. So it's had me question, especially from a religious perspective, kind of giving you a long-winded answer to this, but many times when we're in the shit or the storm or the season, whatever it is, when we're in it and we want it taken away, it's too much. Mm-hmm. I don't like this. We're praying many times for those that, pray to God, whatever, to ask for this to be taken away, help this, right? Or we see other people that are in pain or struggling, mm-hmm. and we're praying for them to have this taken away from them. But just what if that trial that I'm going through, or that trial or breakup or whatever that someone I care deeply is going through, is exactly what they need. And in fact, that particular thing is actually the gift. That is the gift from God. I am giving you this. I love you so much mm-hmm. that I'm willing to let you suffer and go through to hell and back, because when you come out on the other side of this, you're going to be a better person. Everything you want's there, and it's the door that is shutting or has been shut. There's 10 more that open. Yeah. And we don't quite see them yet.
Yeah. I believe that. I believe that so strongly. I heard something this morning that I think everything you just said, what I heard was all of those trials and challenges and all the pain and suffering that you go through, it's qualifying you. It's qualifying you to be who you're supposed to be. It's qualifying you to help those that you're supposed to help. It's qualifying you to step into your calling and to step into the life you're more aligned to live. And something I also noticed is, in my own experience, and I shared this with you recently too, is that, I just had a baby. Yeah. And it was a really scary time. I had a very high risk pregnancy.
Yeah, life-threatening for you.
Life-threatening. And, I had never really been in that situation where someone told me, hey, you could die from this, And so it was scary. I was hospitalized for a few weeks, and it was really touch and go. And it was, the doctors would come in every day and say, hey, we're going to move up the delivery. And it was scary for my baby as well, because she'd have to be born early, and that meant she'd have to be in the NICU and she could have long-term complications. So it was just a really scary time. And, I didn't choose that circumstance, but what happened and developed from that, I am so grateful for, because I went into this space of fear and I was like, I could die. I don't want to die. This is scary. My baby could have long-term health problems. I could, have long-term health problems or just not be here anymore. And it was so cool because my dad offered for his best friend to come visit me. And I had never met this man before because it was like, I just didn't know him. But he came and he was talking to me in the hospital. And he said, and it's because my dad was in Hawaii and he couldn't come. So he asked for his best friend to come. And he asked me, say, what's going on? So I explained everything. The surgery was going to be the following week. And, it was scary up until then. Any emergency could happen at any moment. And he asked me, he's like, what's the desires of your heart? And that was like, it was such a beautiful question. I ask that all the time in my coaching, right? But he asked it to me in that moment. And I started crying and I was like, I really, truly want to just have the surgery go as well as possible so that me and my daughter will be healthy and have no long-term health problems. And I want to raise my kids alongside my husband. And that is what I truly want. He's like, okay, focus on that. He's like, you are a powerful creator. You can create that. And so instead of focusing on the fear of dying, I totally changed that focus and that story. And I created that. And then it was a miracle. My surgery was like best case scenario. The doctors were like, I've never seen a case that looked that bad have such a great outcome. And he's like, you lost way less blood than a normal C-section. And we have to lie at the conference that we're going to present this to, saying that you lost more blood than you did because no one's going to believe us. And it was a miracle. My baby's fine. She's healthy. And I still feel, but the days after felt so powerful and felt so empowered. And still I can go back to that feeling. And it was like, if I hadn't gone through that scary situation, and I wouldn't have been able to experience being able to create in such a powerful way and flip that fear into creation from the desires of my heart. And now I have that to go back to and to harness that feeling of being so powerful. And I can and I can use that to create other things in my life. And so just like what you were saying, it's like those challenges, those trials, those scary things, those times when you're suffering, that is the gift from God.
It is. And I've thank you for sharing, by the way. That's awesome. And again, how many women are you going to be able to help that go through similar situations that are telling themselves a different story, or, because you can connect with them.
Yeah. Whatever that challenge is, that scary
so
thing
I've been
is.
through so much. I laugh about it. I'm like, one of the greatest gifts I have is I can connect in people's shit.
Yeah.
And while each situation is very unique to that particular person, what I believe where we can help people, coach or not, is when you've gone through something, there's empathy there. Empathy is generated by experience. Knowledge, the word I know is way overused. The only way you truly know something is if you've experienced it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just an opinion or belief. I know I would never do this, right? No, you don't. Or I know I wouldn't. It's like, well, you say that, but you're not in that person's shoes. You have no idea. Like if I look back on some of the things that I went through, it's like, I never would have. It's like, but I did, because there were millions of different circumstances and details that factored into that led me to doing certain things. And it's like, I'm not proud of that, but nevertheless, it's like, shit happens. Life happens. And I'm of the belief today that every challenge, like what you just went through, was a gift.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like it in the moment. And I mean, I hope to one day get to a place where I have a superpower. It's like when I'm in that, it's like I'm giving thanks for it. So I'm in a season today that if I'm finding myself wanting something to pass, I express gratitude for it. I know what's coming's better. It always has been that way. I have 47 years of life of knowing that it's always better. It might look different, but it's always been better as a result of me going through the storm. So I'm going to stay in it and I'm not going to run from it.
Yeah.
And I've been in seasons where I've ran and tried to hide from it, and all I do is kick the can down the road.
Yeah.
That's why addiction, especially with men, is such a prevalent thing. It's because it's avoidance. You're avoiding what you have to do, and all you're doing is kicking the can down the road. And if you just rip the Band-Aid off, as painful as that is, it's freedom.
It's so true. It's so true. The greatest gift we can give ourselves is confronting ourselves and being honest, being in integrity. And like you said, like it's so hard for people to have even difficult conversations. And I think that's something I thrive at. I had to learn it, but I'm really good at confronting people and just being like, this is it. What's up, you know? And so it like drives me crazy when other people don't do the same. But I realize it's like, it's that fear. It's that fear of being vulnerable. And it's just like, if you could just see how that gift on the other side of the discomfort of showing up and being honest and stop avoiding and confronting and just confront yourself. And it's such a beautiful gift. So
yeah, and I don't understand. Some people have bigger things than others, and I don't understand it, and I can't pretend to, and I can try to connect with them and have empathy or sympathy or whatever. But at the end of the day, we each have our challenges, our trials, and they're gifts. They truly are gifts. Yeah. And again, it's a perspective, it's a story, and trust me, I've told myself the other story, and that doesn't work. So I'm choosing today, just like you, to tell myself a different story, and it feels good. And again, it's not right or wrong. It's just like, that's my belief today. And someone could feel completely different, and that's their prerogative. That's their thing. I don't know necessarily. And if they want to sit in that, because to me, when you get into that headspace, poor me, blah, 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 you become a victim and a martyr, and all of a sudden you give your power away as if you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes life happens to us, things happen to us that are out of our control.
Yeah.
But what we do with what life gives us is in our control. Yeah. How we react, how we show up, like that is our responsibility.
Yeah.
And again, it's empowering. And unfortunately, most people don't. I mean, you know, during the time of this recording, we just had an election, and I am mind blown by people like on both sides getting so caught up in the fear and all the uncertainty, and their entire worlds, they're flipping their whole worlds upside down, and something, frankly, they have zero control over.
Yeah. People have committed suicide.
Oh yeah. It's wild to me. It's sad.
Yeah.
And people are getting caught up and pointing fingers, but you have no control over it. So that's another big thing for me is like, if I catch myself worrying or stressing about this, or especially about somebody else or different things, like if I get into my head, I'm like, I have zero control over anyone else but me.
Yeah.
And then it's another further self-check, self-reflect. It's like, wait a minute. Well, I'm spinning this out. So how do I get my emotions back into, so I can get into alignment, and then I can control what I can control, which is only me.
Yeah, exactly. Your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, that's it. You can control that, but it creates your whole reality and your whole world.
So Rachel, you and I could spend hours talking about this stuff.
Yeah, we could.
Tell our listeners, like, where can they find you? If someone wants to engage with you, like, where do we find Rachel?
Yeah, best place would probably be Instagram at Rachel Joy Royal. So. And
we'll put her link to all her stuff. And do you have a website?
I had one. I am rebooting it right now. Yeah,
we'll put a link to her Instagram, and you can DM Rachel there. I can tell you from personal experience working with Rachel, like, she's incredible. So much respect and appreciation for you and the work you're doing, and the impact you've had in my life has been monumental, and I could spend hours talking about it, and we'll continue to sing your praises. And the thing I love the most about you is, again, you've embodied this. You do it in such a great way as far as communicating it, and you redirect it back to the clients, like for us to make our decision. And I honor the hell out of that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you for being with me today. And thank you for everybody for joining us on the Burnout Podcast. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.